Oh boy. Okay. There we go. So there's camera. All right. Now we just wait for people to join. Hello. We're gonna wait for a few more people to join, and then we're gonna get started with our harvest hangout. Alright, and bear with us with the wind a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't affect the quality of the sound too much, but if it does, let us know, and hopefully we can pause and wait for the wind to pass through. We're out here in the orchard with Riveridge Produce in Sparta, Michigan, so northwest of Grand Rapids.
Right across the road from Pat.
Alright, wait a couple more minutes, see if we can get some more people. Technically it doesn't start till 3, we just wanted to get on here and get some people to join so we can get started. We were talking earlier, thankfully the weather held up for us. It's not rainy and cold like it's been around here, and there's no snow, thankfully, so it's a sunny day. Perfect. Alright, I think we're going to get started now. So, hello everyone, I'm Kelley Chase, Michigan Girl, Michigan Great Ambassador, and I'm joined with Jamie Cover from Riveridge Produce in Sparta. So Jamie, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do at Riveridge?
Sure. So my name is Jamie Cover. I'm the enhancement director here for Riveridge. I work with the growers, packers, and with our cider plant, and then the sales office, and coordinate a lot of the projects that involve food safety, quality control, a lot of our data analysis, IT departments, things like that. So a lot of different varieties throughout the growing seasons.
So do you typically do something different every day, or do you have a set schedule that you try to accomplish?
So my schedule can be very variable, especially depending on the timing of the year. So this time of year, harvest is underway. So, you know, obviously the growers are very busy, harvest crews are very busy. Food safety is a concern every day, so we have our people watching that, but managing harvest schedules. I'm working with a lot of our packing facilities right now, so we're just making sure that we're getting the right products, the raw products, apples in the door, and then getting them turned back out to customers. We're blessed with a really nice harvest this year. We have a lot of apples, a lot of nice quality apples, and so growers need their bins returned, so our packing plants are working many hours right now to get all those bins returned back to growers and get them filled so we can get them into storage for the rest of the year.
Awesome. Alright, so we're in the orchard right now. I'm going to turn the camera around and give you a little bit of the view. So what variety of apples are these?
So we are standing in Riveridge orchard right now. So harvest is probably, maybe a couple weeks left for growers depending on varieties that they have, and Braeburn is one of the later varieties to be harvested. So for Riveridge, this will be one of our last varieties. Right now, Fuji and Evercrisp are being harvested along with Pink Lady, and then wrapping up with Braeburn.
So when do you guys anticipate being completely finished with your harvest?
For Riveridge, probably within the week or 10 days, and most growers in this area of the Ridge in Michigan are going to be on the same schedule.
Okay, so and if any of you guys watching have any questions, feel free to comment them below and we'll get them answered for you guys. So what does Riveridge do to ensure that they have a successful year and a successful harvest?
So a lot of what we do, relies on the grower partners that we have. Since we market 50% of the apples that are in Michigan, the fresh apples, so we work a lot with the growers and helping them to be successful. So through management practices, we try to develop different things on our farm and do different research projects. Some of the things we worked on this year are emphasize getting the fruit count right on the tree, so thinning trials. We're also trialing new technologies as far as crop yield management. So we've used a drone to count how many apples are going to be on the tree so we know what to harvest. We've used tractor mounted vision systems to go through the orchard and count the apples on the trees to get the same idea so that we know what the crop is going to be. And we are trialing that technology to then help growers hopefully find ways to use that technology. So that's one of the roles that Riveridge plays in supporting the growers so that we all have better crops and more apples to market every year.
So when you talk about thinning apples on a tree, can you kind of further explain that and kind of why growers might thin their apples?
Sure. So apple trees want to produce lots of apples, and so they will set a crop with a lot of apples on there, and it would produce more apples than we really want to see as consumers of apples. So they'd be smaller, they might be poorer in quality, and most importantly, it sets them up so then the next year they might not have as many apples. And so what we call it is biannual. And so they would turn into biannual bearing, meaning they have a very large crop one year and almost no crop the next year. So what we do is in the spring, we go through and we will adjust the crop load so that we kind of even that out so that every year we can expect the same amount of apples. So it'll start very early, even when apples are just in blossom, and we can chemical thin or we can use hand thinning to take those blossoms off. So what we'll do is set a count per tree and say, a certain size tree, this tree we might want 100 apples on it, and we'll thin it down to that number of apples very early in the season so that it's consistent bearing for every year after that.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we have our first question here. Will it be a record-setting crop this year?
It is looking that way. It's a very good crop. It's very high quality. We're very fortunate. Numbers won't be in for a while, but the projections early before harvest started were just a little less than 30 million. That's a pretty decent crop for Michigan, but it's also where we think we should normally be. This year was really good. We didn't have really hardly any frost challenges in the spring, so that facilitated really good bloom on the trees. We had pretty decent pollination weather, so between the wind and our native pollinators, that all worked really well, and so we have the nice crop that we see here. So we won't know for a while yet, but it is looking like it's going to be one of our better crops.
That's exciting. That's exciting.
It is, yes.
And when you say 30 million, do you mean 30 million apples, 30 million bushels?
Good question. So yeah, 30 million bushel. So
bushels,
we always
okay.
talk in bushels. So 30 million bushel is what we expect for the crop.
And how big is a bushel?
A bushel, yeah, it changes. So we figured, depending on how you look at it, it's a volume fill, but really if you put it into pounds, something everybody's familiar with, it'd be around 36 to 38 pounds of apples.
Okay, so 30 million bushels is a lot of apples.
It is.
So next question, what is your favorite apple variety?
My favorite is a Jonagold, but they're getting harder to find. So I would go with my new favorite, or newer favorite, is an Evercrisp, is a newer variety that's coming in the market and should be available in stores later this season. They usually come out around January. They're harvested now, obviously, but they don't reach stores until January usually. It's a really good apple. It's a cross between a Honeycrisp and a Fuji, and it's really brought the best characteristics of both of those parents to that one new variety. So Evercrisp I'd have to go with as my new favorite.
Good choice, good choice. All right, and does fall frost affect the apples that are still on the trees?
It does. Some it's not so critical. What it will do is it just it can loosen the apples up off of the tree if we have several more severe frost events, and so then it will make it more critical for timing to come through and get them before they fall off the tree. For Honeycrisp in particular, it's a little different. So Honeycrisp are very difficult to grow, to pack, to ship to stores, but obviously they're a great apple and a lot of people like them. But what will happen to a Honeycrisp on the tree is it can develop a disorder called internal browning if it's cooled too fast. And when we have those frost events, it can simulate what happens if we put them into storage and it cools that too fast. So that is something that we monitor as we're picking. And we have equipment in our packing facilities that actually scan apples internally, and we can sort those defects out if we do see that. So you shouldn't end up with that at the store, but it is a consideration that we have in the orchard and packing side.
Okay. And so do you process the apples on your operation or do you transport to another facility?
So we're standing on Riveridge Land Company, one of their orchards. We take our apples for fresh pack. We will take them to Riveridge Packing, which is a apple packer. So they're washing and sorting the apples, putting them in the packages that you see in the store. We have 8 other facilities in Michigan that we work with that do the same thing. And then Riveridge has another plant, Riveridge Cider Company, where we'll take some of these apples, turn them into cider. But some of the apples will go to other local processors, so for slices and applesauce and things like that. So there is a pretty strong apple infrastructure in Michigan to make sure that all the apples have a home. When a big concern is food waste right now, and what happens to all this food. All of the apples that we see out here, we see it have value, and so none of them get wasted. They end up somewhere. It just might be in juice, could be in sauce or slices, or it's going to end up in a grocery store.
So at Riveridge Cider, do you process only Riveridge apples or do you also welcome other growers' apples as well?
Yeah, we process about 700 bins of apples, and those bins weigh about 800 to 900 pounds. We do 700 bins a day, and Riveridge Land Company can't possibly supply that many apples. So we work with probably 200 to 300 growers in the Michigan area to source those apples and fill our demand right now. This is our peak season for cider. We have about 16 weeks from the 1st of September through the 1st of the year where we see our peak cider demand. So we're processing a lot of apples right now.
Great. And when you make apple cider, do you use a special blend of apple varieties? Is there a specific variety that is best for cider?
Yeah, so we do blend apples. It's important to get a good cider. You want to blend apples because different apples have different flavors, different characteristics, different profiles. And so some of the things with cider that we look for are the Brix level, which is sugar content, the pH. You want it to have kind of that acidic kind of bite to it, and then acid. Malic acid is one of the things we also monitor. So those are 3 of our more critical components. So as apples come in and are received at cider, they will get a small sample. They'll do that testing on them to determine what those characteristics are. And then as they mix a batch, they'll look at their inventory to mix those characteristics to get the final product the way that they want it. There's not necessarily a set recipe, but we do always want to go for a blend of apples.
Okay. And for anyone just joining us, we are with Riveridge Produce in Sparta, Michigan. I'm talking with Jamie Kober, who's the Enhancement Director. And so if you have any questions, be sure to leave a comment and we'll get to those. So where can people buy Riveridge apples and cider?
So Riveridge distributes into most retail stores that are around, so in all sizes. So it's pretty easy to find them. We have our own label, so you can look for bags. That's probably the easiest place to find it. You'll see the Riveridge name on there. Our cider is also in most retail stores in the area. And again, you'll see it just by Riveridge label. And you'll know that cider comes from Grant, Michigan, or if it's an apple product, it came usually from the Ridge. So like you said earlier, we're outside of Sparta, which is on the northwest side of Grand Rapids. That's where most of the apples are grown, and that's where most of them are packed.
Okay. And do most of Riveridge apples stay in Michigan, or do you also distribute outside of the state?
Right, we do ship a significant part of the apples out of the state. So we are going a lot of the Midwest, going down into the Southeast, and then some over to the east side of the country, a little bit to the west, but then we start to just have the distance between how far we can get with freight prices versus what Washington can ship from the east as well.
And you talked earlier about research regarding yield and how many apples are on the tree. What other research is going on in the industry to better it?
Yeah, so we work closely with Michigan State University Extension. So they are always open to listening to grower community as far as what research needs to be done. And they've also been very helpful to us as we establish some of these trials on our own on the farm. And so we've done that with cherries, which have been even into like the structure of the tree. So trying different training systems to see what works best for sweet cherries. We are, like I said, we did the thinning trial this year. We actually were able to take those apples and take them to a sizer that Michigan State has in the Sparta area here, and they ran and collected that data for us. So that's where we see a lot of the benefit of having that connection with Extension locally, and where we get the kind of the drive for some of the projects that we work on.
And when you're doing the research, how long does it normally take from when the first idea of it kind of started before it's really getting implemented into the orchards and farms in the area?
That's a very good question. So we ourselves, Riveridge Land Company, we usually start meeting in December or January. That's shortly after Expo is done downtown. So our orchard team has probably been to a lot of the seminars down there and heard about different ideas other people are doing and trying. And so they come back excited to, think about how that could apply to our farm. And so we'll meet in December or January and talk about what things we want to try for the next growing season. We'll plan them out then. We'll meet a few more times as spring goes through, and then we'll start to implement them. There's a lot of, especially because it's a long growing season, there's a lot of coordination that goes on to make sure that everybody's on the same page. We've had trials, we set them up and mark them and come through, and somebody picked all the apples off because they didn't know what was going on. And so those can be challenging, but because it is an annual crop, it takes a while to find things that can then be adopted just as a commercial practice. So it would be definitely a few growing seasons, maybe 4 or 5 years before you find things that are really effective or feel comfortable adopting.
And does Riveridge grow just apples, or are there any other produce that you guys grow all as well?
Yep, so we mainly apples, but we do have quite a bit of sweet cherries, and we are planting more sweet cherries. That's one of the kind of innovations that we're trying right now, is we're putting row covers over cherries. So it's basically putting a tent over an orchard. We do this tent one row at a time, but it effectively covers the whole orchard, and that's to prevent pests like birds from getting into the crop. It's to shed the water off so we can prevent cracking. And even in the spring, it can be used for frost mitigation, so to keep heat down closer to the tree. So apples by far number one. We have sweet cherries. We do have a few plums, but apples are definitely our biggest crop.
Are your sweet cherries processed into anything else, or do you sell them just as fresh product?
Yep, most of our sweet cherries are just going fresh. That's the goal of pretty much all of the crops that we raise, is to get to the fresh market. If we have an off year because of quality or something like that, we may divert into a processed market, but our goal is to get to the fresh market.
And are there different varieties of sweet cherries, or are they all the same thing?
There are different varieties. So we have several different varieties, and what that does for us is then extends the harvest season longer. So we'll have some that mature early and then some that are later. So we're trying to stretch that window out. There can be some quality differences too, but we're really looking at trying to extend cherry season as long as we can. And varieties are one way. We also are planting geographically diverse regions so that we can start picking, down south in areas sooner, and then we can stretch that up north. We have a farm up near Walkerville, and that will have sweet cherries on it as well. So we're really looking to extend that cherry season.
Very cool. Okay, so next question is, what has been the most exciting new technique or growing method implemented in the last few years?
One thing that, it kind of seems minor, but we're looking towards mechanization of orchards so that we can not necessarily get rid of people by any means, but just so we can make things more uniform. We can adopt practices that make it easier to do the work that has to be done in the orchard. And kind of the first way to get there is to have a uniform orchard, a uniform planting. And so using GPS to plant these orchards has been probably one of the most widespread adoptions over the last few years. That's been interesting to see. These orchards can last, they can last 40 years. The trees would be fine. So you only get one chance to get your orchard planted right. And that's why it's really important to start there. And I think that by doing that, down the road, 10, 20 years, it's going to give people lots of flexibility as we see more of these tools become available in the orchard. One that's available right now is a mechanical platform. So self-propelled platforms that a worker can stand on, so they don't have to carry ladders around the orchard, and then they can come to the trees, and they can do pruning, they can do thinning, they can do training, they could put up trellis materials. but they don't need to, like I said, carry the ladder. They don't need to walk around the orchard. They don't need to carry supplies with them because they can be on the platform. So it's just an example of where the one technology GPS has fed into the next round, which is these harvest platforms, and hopefully somewhere down the road we might even get into robotic harvesting and things like that.
Very cool. It's interesting to see how things change and develop throughout the years. So how long does it take to make apple cider? So from harvest to when it hits the grocery store shelf, what's the turnaround?
So right now it's not very long. We produce about 40,000 gallons a day, and we're shipping that product out almost daily. So right now, probably the longest thing would be harvest. So apples might be sitting days to maybe a few weeks. And if they're a few weeks, it would be because they're going over a packing line first, and then they're getting sorted out. So the apples that are going to cider would be apples that are too small to go to retail, or maybe they have slight defects on the surface that just aren't going to appeal to people in the grocery store level. So they would get sorted out and sent to the cider plant. But from the time they're turned into juice, right now, this time of year, it's going to be days that you're going to see it in the store. So it's a pretty fast turnaround.
And what is the difference between apple cider and apple juice?
We get this question a lot. So apple cider, what we're doing, we take the apples, we grind them up, and we squeeze the juice out, and that's about it. That juice then goes into a bottle and it goes out to the store. With apple juice, it's same process to get the liquid, but it just goes through a lot more filtering steps. So there can be different processes involved to clarify that juice and remove more of the particles that give you that brownish color or the turbidity that's in apple cider. So similar products, just juice goes through a lot more processing to get filtered down.
And do you prefer apple cider, or would you rather drink apple juice?
I prefer apple cider.
Very
I'll
good
take it
choice.
straight,
I agree. All right. So if anybody has any more questions, feel free to add them into the comments. We'll give you another view of the orchard here. All right. And you said these were Braeburn apples, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Correct.
And are those mostly used for eating? Are they more of a baking apple?
So they're pretty versatile. They're very firm. So people do like them for baking, but they're fine to eat too.
Very interesting. And how many different varieties does Riveridge grow?
We grow probably still 12 to 15 varieties, but we're really seeing a consolidation in varieties of what's being popular for retail into varieties like Gala, Fuji, Honeycrisp, Ambrosia, Pink Lady. So we still have Jonathan, Macintosh, Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, some of those old favorites around, but we're just seeing it change in the retail stores to those other varieties.
Okay, so it looks like that's pretty much the end of the questions. If anybody has any other ones they want to ask, add them in now and we'll get to them. But thank you everyone for watching. Again, this was Harvest Hangout with Riveridge Produce. This is Jamie Kober, and I'm Kelley Chase, Michigan Girl, Michigan Ambassador. So thanks everyone for joining, and make sure to have some Michigan apples.